Disclaimer: this story is fictional. All characters and events are imaginary. Any resemblance to real people or events is purely coincidental. Reproduction is strictly prohibited. Welcome to a new story. You can watch us every day. A new story is released daily at 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. Enjoy your watching, and feel free to tell us your feedback. The gift was a wolf. Knitted, not carved, not cast, not the particular expensive craftsman-produced quality that royal gifts typically carried. Knitted from gray wool by hands whose skill was evident in the stitching, and whose stitching's evidence was invisible to a man who did not know what skilled stitching looked like. The wolf was 8 inches tall. Soft, slightly asymmetrical, the left ear a fraction larger than the right. The particular, handmade. A person made this not a factory quality that asymmetry communicated, and that the communicating was the object's honesty. Machine-made things were symmetrical. Handmade things carried the maker's specific, individual. My hands shaped this signature in every deviation from the template. The wolf arrived at the Voss Palace during the harvest tribute, the annual ceremony where the territory's citizens presented gifts to the crown. In the particular, traditional, we acknowledged the relationship ritual that the ceremony represented. The gifts were symbolic rather than valuable. The symbolism was the point. The territory gave. The crown received. The giving and the receiving was the contract's annual renewal. The gifts ranged from agricultural products, honey, preserved meats, to crafted goods, textiles, pottery, woodwork, and the ranging was the territory's portrait, each gift representing the region, the trade, the particular livelihood of the person presenting it. The presenting was the vulnerability. Each citizen walked to the presentation table, placed the gift, and the placing was observed by the court and the king and the particular, 300 person. I am being watched quality that the observing produced in the person being observed. The vulnerability was the ceremony's unspoken cost, the emotional tariff that the tradition extracted from the giver, in exchange for the giving's symbolic participation in the contract. Hilma Gren paid the tariff at approximately 2:15 p.m. 29. Omega, a textile worker from the coastal village of Saltvik, a woman whose livelihood was the knitting that the village's wool economy produced and whose knitting was the village's primary export, and whose primary export's representative gift was the wolf she had made and whose making had occupied approximately 40 hours of the particular, careful, every stitch is placed quality that the making required. 40 hours. Compressed into 8 inches of gray wool, carried 3 days by cart to the capital, presented at 2:15 p.m. to a court that would evaluate the presenting and the presented through the particular, social, we assess before we accept filter that courts applied to everything. The filter assessed Hilma before the filter assessed the wolf. This was the filter's methodology, the person first, the gift second. The filter's assessment of Hilma was conducted through the particular, visual, instant, what do I see evaluation that 300 pairs of eyes performed simultaneously. A woman. Omega, coastal clothing practical, wind-worn, carrying the particular salt and weather quality that coastal textiles acquired through daily exposure to the maritime climate. Short, broad the particular, sturdy, built for the work quality that physical labor produced in women whose daily work was physically demanding and whose physically demanding work had shaped the body according to the work's specifications rather than the court's aesthetic preferences. The court's aesthetic preferences did not include broad. The court's aesthetic preferences operated on the particular, narrow. The body should look like the specification that courts produced, and that the specifications narrow meant Hilma's body was outside the specification, and the outside was assessed before the gift was assessed, and the assessing of the outside colored the assessing of the gift, because the coloring was the filter's design. The person and the gift were evaluated together, and the together meant the evaluation of one contaminated the evaluation of the other. Hilma placed the wolf on the presentation table. The placing was the vulnerability's peak, the moment where the gift was visible, and the gift's visibility included the gift's quality, and the gift's quality was subject to the court's assessment, and the court's assessment was subject to the court's aesthetics, and the court's aesthetics had already assessed the person, and the person's assessment was coloring the gift's assessment, and the coloring was the prejudice, and the prejudice was operating. Alpha King Henrik Voss picked up the wolf. The picking up was protocol. The king examined each gift, acknowledged the giver, the particular, ceremonial, Thank you for your contribution gesture that the protocol specified. Henrik picked up the wolf, turned it, examined it with the particular, cursory, I am performing examination rather than conducting it quality that the examination carried when the examination was ceremonial rather than genuine. The wolf was soft in the king's hands. The asymmetry was visible, the left ear larger, the particular, handmade, imperfect quality visible to anyone looking. The king produced a sound, not laughter the precursor. The particular, nasal, exhaled, almost a laugh quality that amusement produced before the amusement committed to full expression. The sound was accompanied by a glance toward Lord Edvard Strand, the chief advisor the particular. Shared, can you believe this quality that the glance communicated between two people whose shared social framework classified the wolf as insufficient? Charming. The word from the king, delivered with the particular, tonal. The word means the opposite quality that condescension produced when condescension used positive vocabulary to deliver negative assessment. Charming meaning, inadequate. Amusing, not serious. The particular, diminishing. I am reducing this with a word quality that charming carried when charming was the weapon, and the weapon's target was the gift, and the gift's maker, and the maker was standing at the presentation table absorbing the charming's actual content through the particular. Instant. I know what that word means, recognition that condescension's targets always possessed. Because the targets had been hearing the tonal quality their entire lives, and the hearing had trained the recognition. The wolf was placed on the secondary table, the particular, away from the primary. This gift is categorized as lesser positioning that the secondary table communicated. Primary table, the valued gifts. Secondary, the polite acceptances. The wolf was a polite acceptance. The wolf was categorized as lesser. And the categorizing's public visibility, 300 people observing the secondary table placement, was the mockery's mechanism. Not a speech, not explicit ridicule. The placement, the charming, the glance at Strand, the particular, accumulated, small things that add up to humiliation methodology that sophisticated mockery employed, because sophisticated mockery did not require volume. Sophisticated mockery required position. Hilma left the presentation table, walked back through the hall's center aisle, the 30-foot corridor that the architecture provided for the particular, visible. Everyone watches you leave quality that the walking back carried. The walking back was the vulnerability's resolution, the giving was done. The assessing was done. The charming was done. The walking back was the leaving the vulnerability, and the leaving carried the particular. Dignity maintained. I will not show the wound quality that the maintaining required, and that the maintaining cost and the costing was the walk's invisible cargo. The wolf sat on the secondary table. 8 inches of gray wool. 40 hours of making. 3 days of traveling. Categorized as lesser. The wolf did not know it was lesser. The wolf was a wolf. 40 hours of knitting. 3 days by cart. The king picked it up, exhaled an almost laugh, said charming in the tone that means the opposite, and placed it on the secondary table. 300 witnesses. The mockery didn't require volume, it required position. The wolf didn't know it was lesser. The wolf was a wolf. Chapter 1. Prince Elias Voss was 3 and conducted nightly warfare against sleep. The warfare's campaigns were documented by the nursery staff Halla Eriksson, the primary attendant, maintaining a log whose entries read like military dispatches. 8:15 p.m., subject refused initial placement. 8:32 p.m., subject exited crib for the 4th time. 9:07 p.m., subject achieved sleep after 42 minutes of resistance. The resistance was nightly. The resistance was comprehensive. The resistance was the particular, 3-year-old sleep is the enemy quality that bedtime produced in a child whose relationship with consciousness was possessive. The waking world contained things the sleeping world did not, and the not containing was the injustice, and the injustice was the resistance. The resistance had a secondary component the staff did not document because the secondary component was the particular, emotional. This is the real issue quality that the behavioral surface concealed. Elias did not resist sleep because sleep was boring. Elias resisted sleep because sleep was alone. The aloneness was the issue the particular, nighttime, the room is dark, and the people are gone quality that bedtime's architecture produced when the architecture's design was. The child sleeps independently. The independently was the policy. The policy was Gerda Stahls, the king's mother, whose child-rearing philosophy was the particular, generational. Children must learn independence quality that Gerda's generation practiced, and that the practicing produced the policy and the policy produced the resistance, because the resistance was the child's negotiation with a policy the child had not consented to. The king was not involved in the bedtime campaigns. Henrik Voss's parenting operated through the delegation model, the particular, governance trained. I assign the task to the appropriate department quality that the delegation produced. Bedtime was the nursery department. The nursery department managed bedtime. The managing success or failure was reported through the household hierarchy, and the hierarchy's reporting was the king's interface with the bedtime, and the interface was informational rather than participatory. The king knew his son resisted sleep. The king did not experience the resisting because the experiencing was the nursery's function and the function was delegated. The wolf arrived in the nursery through the particular post-ceremony. Gifts are distributed channel that the harvest tributes aftermath produced. The secondary table gifts, the polite acceptances, the categorized as lesser, were distributed to the household departments for use or storage. The textile gifts went to the domestic wing. The knitted wolf, classified as a textile, traveled through the distribution channel from the secondary table to the domestic wing to the storage room where the domestic staff processed the tribute's textile intake. The processing included the sorting, the particular, functional, what is this and where does it go evaluation that the sorting applied to each item. Mrs. Petra Orland, the head of domestic services, sorted the wolf. The sorting's evaluation, a knitted toy. Quality, high, the stitching assessed by a domestic professional whose professional assessment was more informed than the king's ceremonial assessment, because the domestic professional understood textiles and the understanding produced the assessment that the ceremony had not produced. The stitching was skilled. The wool was premium coastal gray, the specific, Saltvik. This wool is the best in the territory quality that the wool's origin communicated to a person who knew wool, and Mrs. Orland knew wool. The toy's destination, the nursery. A handmade toy of this quality belonged with the child. Mrs. Orland delivered the wolf to Hala Eriksson with the particular. Here is something for the prince quality that the delivery communicated. Hala placed the wolf in the nursery. Not prominently among the existing toys, the collection of objects that the nursery contained, and that the containing's volume was substantial, because royal nurseries accumulated toys through the particular. Everyone gives the prince things mechanism that royal childhood produced. Carved horses, painted soldiers. The elaborate, expensive craftsmen produced objects that the primary table's gifts had generated. The wolf occupied a shelf among the primary table objects. 8 inches of gray wool beside 12 inches of hand-carved oak. The asymmetry of the left ear beside the symmetry of the machine, calibrated. The handmade beside the produced. Elias found the wolf on a Tuesday. Not found selected. The particular, 3-year-old, this one quality that selection produced when children evaluated a collection, and the evaluating produced the identification of the specific object whose specific quality matched the child's specific need, and the matching was not aesthetic or monetary, but the particular, instinctive. This object speaks to me quality that children's selection operated through, and that the operating was pre-verbal and pre-rational, and the pre-qualities meant the selection was honest in the way that only pre-rational things are honest. Elias selected the wolf because the wolf was soft. This was the selection's entire mechanism, soft. The carved horses were not soft. The painted soldiers were not soft. The elaborate, expensive, primary table objects were crafted for visual impression, and visual impression did not require softness, and the not requiring meant the objects were beautiful and hard, and the beautiful and hard was not what a 3-year-old's hands wanted during the particular nighttime. I need something to hold quality that bedtime's aloneness produced. The hands wanted soft. The wolf was soft. The selection was complete. That evening, Elias held the wolf during the bedtime campaign. Hala documented. 8:12 p.m. Subject placed in crib with new toy, wool. 8:14 p.m. Subject achieved sleep. 2 minutes. The resistance, the 42-minute, nightly, comprehensive warfare against sleep was reduced to 2 minutes. The reduction's mechanism was the wolf. The wolf in the arms. The soft against the chest. The particular, held. I am not alone quality that the holding produced in a child whose resistance was the aloneness, and whose aloneness was addressed by the particular, physical, something is with me quality that the wolf's softness provided. 2 minutes. After months of 42, the wolf accomplished in 2 minutes what the policy and the nursery and the delegation model had not accomplished in months. Sleep. Not resistant sleep. Not the 42-minute warfare sleep that the resistance produced. Immediate. Settled. The particular, deep, the body surrendered quality that genuine sleep produced when the surrendering's conditions were met, and the conditions were not alone. The wolf met the conditions. The wolf was the companion the bedtime had been missing. The wolf was the thing. The wolf traveled from the secondary table to the domestic wing to the nursery shelf. Among carved horses and painted soldiers, the 3-year-old selected it for one quality. Soft. That evening, 2 minutes to sleep. After months of 42. The wolf met the condition the bedtime had been missing. Not alone. 8 inches of gray wool. The thing. Chapter 2. The wolf became non-negotiable within 3 nights. The particular, rapid. This is now essential quality that attachment objects acquired in children whose attachment was the deep kind, the neurological. The object is wired into the sleep architecture kind that converted the object from a preference into a requirement, and the requirement's conversion was permanent in the way that neurological wiring was permanent. Night 1, 2 minutes to sleep. Night 2, 90 seconds. Night 3, the wolf was in the arms before the crib, and the before meant the wolf was not an addition to the bedtime, but a precondition, and the precondition's establishment was the permanence's evidence. Night 4 produced the test. The wolf had been left in the bath, the particular. 3-year-old. I was holding it, and then I was in the bath, and the holding stopped quality that transitions produced when the transitions interrupted the holding, and the interruption deposited the object in the previous location. The wolf was in the bathroom. Elias was in the crib. The crib did not contain the wolf. The not containing produced the particular, immediate, system alarm. The thing is missing response that attachment object's absence generated in the attached child. The response was not a tantrum. Tantrums were behavioral, the conscious, strategic. I am producing distress to produce a response quality that behavioral distress carried. The response was physiological heart rate elevating, cortisol producing. The particular, neurological. The system is an emergency quality that the attachment object's absence triggered, because the absence was processed by the child's nervous system as the loss of the safety the object represented, and the safety's loss was an emergency, and emergencies produced emergency responses. Hala retrieved the wolf from the bathroom in approximately 4 minutes.
4 minutes of emergency response, the particular, escalating, the child cannot be comforted quality that the 4 minutes contained, because the comforting required the object, and the object was in the bathroom, and the bathroom was 4 minutes away, and the 4 minutes were the duration of the emergency, and the emergency's duration was 4 minutes.
Of a 3-year-old's nervous system operating in the particular, distressed, the safety is gone mode that the emergency produced. Wolf returned. Arms received. Emergency resolved. Time to sleep, 90 seconds. The pattern established across weeks. The wolf was present. Sleep. The wolf was absent. Emergency. The binary was clean. The binary was non-negotiable. The binary was the neurological wiring expressing its requirements through the particular, absolute. There is no alternative quality that wired requirements carried. No substitute was accepted. Hala attempted alternatives during the first week. A different soft toy. A blanket shaped into a companion. The particular, standard nursery substitution methodology that attachment management typically deployed. Each substitute was rejected. The rejection was the particular, immediate. This is not the thing quality that children produced. When the substitute was offered and the substitute's not being the thing, was detected instantly, because the detection operated at the neurological level where the wiring was specific, and the specific could not be fooled by the approximate. The wolf was the wolf. Nothing else was the wolf. The wolf was irreplaceable. The household documented. Mrs. Orline's domestic report noted the attachment. Hala's nursery log noted the sleep improvement. The documentation traveled upward through the household hierarchy, the particular, administrative, information moving toward the decision-maker quality that upward-moving documentation carried. The documentation reached Lord Strand. Lord Strand's processing produced the particular, administrative. This is notable but not urgent classification that the processing applied to nursery reports. The classification filed the documentation. The filing was the documentation's terminus, the hierarchy's top receiving the information and the receiving not producing action, because the receiving's assessment was, noted, not urgent. The king did not know. The delegation model's particular, insulating. The king does not receive nursery details quality meant the wolf's significance, the attachment. The sleep transformation. The particular, comprehensive. This object is the most important thing in the child's life quality did not reach the man who had placed the wolf on the secondary table and called it charming. The man who had mocked the gift did not know the gift had become the most important object in his son's world. The not knowing was the delegation model's product. The product was the ignorance. The ignorance would not last. 3 nights to become non-negotiable. Wolf present. Sleep. Wolf absent. Emergency. No substitutes accepted. The neurological wiring was specific and could not be fooled by the approximate. The king did not know. The delegation model insulated him from nursery details. The man who mocked the gift didn't know it had become the most important object in his son's world. Chapter 3 The ignorance ended on a Thursday evening when the king, for the first time in approximately 3 months, entered the nursery during bedtime. The entering was not paternal, the entering was logistical. The governance schedule had placed a diplomatic reception at 8 p.m. and the reception's preparation required the particular wardrobe. I need the cufflinks that are in the nursery adjacent storage quality that the logistical reason provided. The cufflinks were in the storage room that connected to the nursery through a shared wall and a connecting door. The connecting door was the entry point. The entry point placed the king in the nursery's acoustic and visual range during the 2 minutes the cufflink retrieval required. The visual range contained his son in the crib, holding a gray knitted wolf. The holding was the particular, both arms. The object is pressed against the chest quality that attachment holding produced, not casual, not one-handed. The full body. This is mind grip that the attachment's neurological wiring generated. The boy was awake the pre-sleep phase. The particular, drowsy, the system is transitioning quality that the wolf's presence facilitated, and that the facilitating was visible in the boy's face. Relaxed, settling, the particular, safe, the thing is here quality that the settling communicated. Henrik recognized the wolf. The recognition was not immediate. The ceremony had contained hundreds of gifts, and the charming had been one assessment among many, and the one among many had not been stored in long-term memory, because the storing required significance, and the significance had not been present during the ceremony. The recognition arrived through the object's particular, gray wool, asymmetrical ear. I have seen this before quality that recognition produced when the recognizing was delayed, and the delay's resolution was the particular, quality that the resolving generated. The tribute. The knitted the sentence fragmented. The fragmentation was the recognition's second phase. The recognizing connecting the object in the child's arms to the object on. The secondary table to the charming that accompanied the secondary table. Placement to the woman whose presenting had been assessed through the filter and whose filter's assessment had colored the gift's assessment, and whose assessment's coloring had produced the mockery that the charming contained. The king looked at the wolf. At the boy holding the wolf. At the particular holding. This is my safety quality that the boy's grip communicated. The grip's communication was the data. The data said, the object you mocked is the object your son holds at the moment your son is most vulnerable, and the holding is the safety, and the safety is the mocked object, and the mocked object is the thing that produces the sleep that 42-minute campaigns could not. Hala was present, the attendant professional. The particular. I am managing the bedtime quality that the presence carried. The king's presence in the nursery during bedtime was unusual enough that Hala's management shifted from bedtime routine to the particular. The king is here quality that the shifting produced. The wolf. Directed at Hala. The 2 words carrying the king's particular. I need information quality. The harvest tribute gift. Your Majesty. Domestic services delivered it to the nursery. Hala's response carrying the professional's particular, factual. I am reporting quality. Prince Elias selected it from the toy collection approximately 6 weeks ago. The attachment developed within 3 nights. Bedtime resistance has been eliminated since the attachment's establishment. Sleep onset time has decreased from an average of 42 minutes to under 2 minutes. The wolf is the prince's primary comfort object. The attachment is neurological substitutes have been attempted and rejected. The object is, in the medical staff's assessment, the prince's sleep architecture's essential component. The report was clinical. The report's clinical quality did not mitigate the report's contents impact the particular. Accumulating, each sentence adds weight quality that the report's content produced when the content was. The gift you dismissed is the gift your son cannot sleep without. The dismissal and the dependency were the same object. The charming and the essential were the same wolf. Henrik stood in the nursery holding cufflinks for a diplomatic reception, while his 3-year-old son held a knitted wolf, and the holding of both the cufflinks and the wolf was the particular, contrasted. One is governance, and one is everything quality that the contrast produced. The cufflinks were the reception. The wolf was the child. The reception was the evening's plan. The child, was the evening's reality. The plan and the reality were in the same nursery, and the same nursery was producing the particular, confronting. The reality is more important quality that the confronting communicated to a man whose delegation model had been insulating him from the reality, and whose insulation was, in this nursery, at this bedtime, being penetrated by a gray wool wolf with an asymmetrical ear. The boy stirred. The stirring was the pre-sleep phase's response to the room's changed conditions, the king's presence introducing a variable the pre-sleep phase had not contained, and the variable's introduction producing the particular not yet asleep. Someone is here awareness that the stirring communicated. The stirring produced the eyes opening. The eyes found the father. The finding was the particular, 3-year-old, you are here quality that the finding produced not alarm, not excitement. The drowsy, pre-sleep, the wolf is still here, and you are also here quality that the finding communicated. The boy held up the wolf. The holding up was the showing the particular, 3-year-old, look at my thing quality that showing produced when the showing was directed at a person whose opinion the child valued, and whose valuing was the showing's motivation. Look, my wolf. The showing's content delivered without words because the delivery did not require words. The showing required arms, and the arms held the wolf toward the father, and the toward was the communication. Henrik looked at the wolf being shown to him by his son. The wolf that the son valued above every carved horse and painted soldier in the nursery. The wolf whose 40 hours of making and 3 days of traveling and 2:15 p.m. of presenting had been assessed as charming by a man who was now receiving the wolf as a showing from a child, whose showing was the particular. I love this quality that showings carried when the showing was voluntary, and the voluntary was the love, and the love was the wolf, and the wolf was the gift he had mocked. The king took the wolf. Gently the particular, receiving from a child, the object is important quality that gentle receiving communicated. Held it. The holding was the first time the king had held the wolf with the particular. Genuine, I am actually feeling this quality rather than the ceremonial. I am performing examination quality that the tribute's holding had carried. The wool was soft. The stitching was dense, the particular, skilled, someone spent significant time quality that the density communicated to hands that were actually feeling rather than hands that were performing feeling. The wolf was warm from the boy's holding the particular. Body heat transferred. The child has been holding this quality that warmth communicated. The warmth was the child's. The warmth said, this is loved. Henrik returned the wolf. The returning was immediate, the boy's hands reaching for the return with the particular, urgent, give it back quality that the reaching communicated. Because the reaching was the attachment, and the attachment did not tolerate extended separation even for the duration of a father's examination. The wolf returned to the arms. The arms closed. The holding resumed. The pre-sleep phase continued, and the king stood in the nursery holding cufflinks that suddenly mattered less than they had 2 minutes ago. The king entered the nursery by accident. Saw his son holding the wolf, the same wolf from the secondary table. Hala reported, 42 minutes reduced to 2. Neurological attachment. No substitutes accepted. The boy held the wolf up to show his father. The showing was the love. The king held it, felt the warmth of his child's grip transferred to the wool. Returned it immediately. The boy's hands reached with urgent give it back. And the cufflinks suddenly mattered less. Chapter 4 The diplomatic reception proceeded. The cufflinks fulfilled their function. The king fulfilled his function, the governance register, the diplomatic performance. The particular, professional. I am managing international relationships quality that the reception required. The fulfilling was mechanical. Behind the mechanical, the nursery. Behind the nursery, the wolf. Behind the wolf, the woman whose gift the wolf was, and whose presenting the charming had dismissed, and whose dismissal was now producing the particular, retroactive. What did I do quality that retroactive assessment generated when the assessment was, I mocked a thing my son loves. The retroactive was not guilt, not yet. The retroactive was data. The data was revising the assessment. The revision was, charming was wrong. The wrong was the data. The data was the wolf in the arms and the 2-minute sleep and the 40 hours of making that the 2 minutes effectiveness represented. The revision continued across days. The particular sustained. I am reconsidering quality that revision produced when the revision was not a single reconsideration but an ongoing, accumulating. Each night's bedtime confirms the revision process. Each night the wolf. Each night the sleep. Each night the particular, consistent. The object is still essential quality that consistency provided. and that the providing was the revision's evidence's daily renewal. Night 11 of the revision, the wolf's ear tore. The left ear, the larger one, the asymmetrical one, the particular, handmade. This is the imperfection quality that the ear's asymmetry represented. The tearing was the holding's consequence. 3-year-old grip strength applied nightly to wool produced the particular, stress point. The most held part fails first failure that stress point analysis predicted. The ear did not detach, the tearing was partial, the wool fraying at the junction where the ear met the head. Partial was sufficient. Partial produced the emergency. Elias's response to the partial tear was the emergency response, the same physiological, cortisol producing. The safety is damaged quality that the wolf's absence produced, but modulated by the particular. Different. The thing is hurt quality that damage produced versus the thing is gone quality that absence produced. The thing was not gone. The thing was hurt, and the hurt produced a different response, not the panicked, where is it emergency of the absence, but the particular, distressed. It is broken quality that damage produced in children whose attachment objects were damaged, and whose damage was experienced by the child not as the object's damage but as the child's own. The nursery's repair attempt was Mrs. Orline's, the domestic professional's particular, practical, I can sew this methodology applied to the fraying ear. The repair was competent. The repair was rejected. The particular, immediate. This is not right quality that the rejection communicated the child detecting the difference between the original stitching and the repair stitching through the particular. Tactile, my fingers know the different sensitivity that attachment objects, holders developed, and that the developing made the holder the object's most accurate quality assessor because the holder's assessment operated, through touch, and touch was more precise than vision for textile. Evaluation. And the precision's verdict was, the repair does not match the original. The repair is wrong. The repair was wrong, because the repair was not Hilma Gren's stitching. The repair was Mrs. Orline's stitching. The two stitchings were different hands, different technique. The particular, individual. Every maker's stitching is a signature quality that handwork carried, and that the carrying meant the repair's signature did not match the original's signature, and the not matching was detectable and the detected. 3 years old, and the child could tell. The wolf needed its maker. The realization traveled through the household hierarchy at the particular, urgent. The prince is distressed velocity that prince-related urgencies produced. The hierarchy's escalation reached Lord Strand. Lord Strand's processing reached the king. The king received the information, the wolf's ear is torn. The nursery cannot repair it to the child's satisfaction. The child's attachment to the wolf requires the repair to match the original's quality. The original's quality was the maker's. The maker is a harvest tribute participant from Saltvik. The king needed to find the woman he had mocked. The finding required the locating, and the locating required the identifying, and the identifying required the tribute's records. The records contained Hilma Gren. Saltvik, textile worker. Omega. The record's content was the identification. The identification's content was the name of the person whose gift had been called charming, and whose charming had been the mockery, and whose mockery was now the context through which the finding would occur, and the finding's occurrence would require the king to approach the person the king had diminished. The approaching was the reckoning. Not the guilt, the reckoning preceded the guilt, because the reckoning was the data, and the data's accumulation was producing the guilt. And the guilt was arriving through the data, rather than through the emotional processing that guilt's conventional arrival method employed. The data was, the gift was skilled. The gift was valued by the child. The gift's valuation by the child exceeded the valuation of every other gift the tribute produced. The gift's maker was assessed through the filter before the gift was assessed. The filter's assessment of the maker colored the gift's assessment. The coloring was the prejudice. The prejudice was the charming. The charming was wrong. The wrong was the reckoning. And the reckoning required the finding, and the finding required a king to travel to a fishing village to ask the woman he had mocked to mend a wolf whose ear had torn because a 3-year-old's love had been too strong for the stitching and the stitchings. Repair required the stitcher, and the stitcher was in Saltvik, and Saltvik was 3 days by cart, and the king would go because the going was the reckoning, and the reckoning was owed. The ear tore. The nursery's repair was rejected. 3-year-old fingers could tell the stitching was different. The wolf needed its maker. The king needed to find the woman he mocked, and the finding required traveling to a fishing village to ask for help from the person the charming had diminished. The data was producing the guilt. The guilt required the going. The going was the reckoning. Chapter 5. Henrik traveled to Saltvik. Not by royal convoy, by the particular, minimal, 2 riders escort that the traveling carried when the traveling was personal rather than ceremonial, and the personal did not require the ceremonial's apparatus. The minimal was deliberate. A king arriving in a fishing village with a convoy communicated governance. A king arriving with 2 riders communicated person. The person was what the reckoning required because the reckoning was personal, and the personal required the person. 3 days. The same distance Hilma had traveled with the wolf. The symmetry was not planned, the symmetry was geographic, and the geographic produced the symmetry, and the producing was the particular, coincidental. The universe is commenting quality that coincidental symmetry carried. 3 days to deliver the gift. 3 days to find the maker. The delivering and the finding connected by the same road and the same distance and the different directions. The gift traveled toward the king. The king was now traveling toward the gift's maker. The directions were reversed. The reversing was the reckoning's spatial expression. Saltvik was a coastal village of approximately 300 people whose primary economy was wool sheep, shearing, spinning, knitting, the particular, comprehensive. Every stage of the process quality that self-contained economies produced when the self-containing was the economy's structure, and the structure's stages were distributed across the village's population. The village smelled like lanolin and salt. The buildings were low, stone-based. The particular, wind-resistant. We built these for the weather quality that coastal architecture produced. The village was not picturesque in the court's aesthetic. The village was functional in the village's aesthetic. The 2 aesthetics were different, and the difference was the thing the court's filter could not accommodate. Hilma Gren's cottage was on the village's eastern edge, a stone building whose interior contained the workshop that the knitting required. Wool stores, needles organized by size, the particular, comprehensive. This is a professional's workspace quality that the workshop communicated to anyone whose assessment was informed by the understanding of craft rather than the understanding of appearance. The workspace was skilled. The workspace said, "The person who works here is serious, and the serious is evident in the organization, and the organization is the skills infrastructure." Hilma was not expecting a king. Hilma was knitting the particular, daily. This is what I do quality that the knitting carried, when the knitting was the work, and the work was the day. And the day was every day. The knitting was a scarf, commissioned by a village resident. The functional, someone needs this quality that village commissions carried, and that the carrying was the economy, and the economy was the village, and the village was Hilma's world. The knock on the cottage door was received with the particular, "Who is this?" Unexpected visitors are unusual quality that cottage door knocks produced in villages where the visitor population was known and the known did not typically produce surprises. Hilma opened the door. Found a man. Tall, wearing traveling clothes rather than ceremonial. Carrying, in his hands, a gray knitted wolf with a torn left ear. The wolf. In the hands of a man she recognized the recognition delayed by the clothing's non-ceremonial quality, but arriving through the face's particular. I have seen this face quality that the tribute's presentation table had produced. The face was the king's. The king was at her door. The king was holding the wolf. The wolf's ear was torn. The holding and the tearing and the door and the king assembled into a picture whose assembly the recognition's completion produced. The recognition also produced the charming. The memory's particular, stored. The humiliation is in the memory quality that the charming's recall generated the tonal quality, the secondary table, the glance at Lord Strand. The recall was immediate. The recall was the context. And the context's presence in the interaction meant the interaction was not neutral. The interaction was the reckoning, and the reckoning was occurring at a cottage door in Saltvik, and the reckoning's participants were the mocker and the mocked, and the object that connected them was a wolf whose ear was torn because a child loved it too much. Neither person spoke for approximately 5 seconds. The 5 seconds contained the king's assessment of the woman, the assessment now unfiltered by the ceremony's 300-person, social evaluation quality, the assessment now direct, individual, the particular. I am seeing this person quality that direct assessment produced. The woman's assessment of the king, the assessment filtered by the charming's memory, the particular. I remember what you did quality that the memory's filtering produced. The 5 seconds ended with the wolf. The king extended the wolf the holding toward, the particular. I am bringing this to you quality that the extending communicated. The extending was not the ceremonial. I am examining the gift quality that the tribute's holding had carried. The extending was the particular. I need your help quality that extending toward produced when the extending was a request rather than an evaluation. His ear tore. The king's voice was not the governance register, not the ceremonial register, the particular, stripped. I am speaking without the position's assistance quality that personal speech produced when the personal was operating and the position was not contributing. My son holds this wolf every night, will not sleep without it. The ear tore because the holding is, he paused. The pausing was the reckoning's arrival. The particular, moment. The thing I said is meeting the thing I need quality that the pausing contained. The holding is strong. Because the wolf matters to him more than any object in the palace. And the wolf matters because the wolf is correct. The wool is correct. The softness is correct. The making is correct. The particular quality that the making carries is the quality my son's nervous system identified as the quality he needed, and the identifying was accurate, and the accuracy is the skill, and the skill is yours, and the skill's product is what I called the pausing deepened. Charming, the word delivered with the particular, recalled, I am saying my own word back to myself quality that recalled words carried, when the recalling was the confronting, and the confronting was the reckoning, and the reckoning was. I said charming, and I meant insufficient, and the insufficient was wrong. The wolf is not insufficient. The wolf is the most necessary object in my household, and the necessary was made by you, in 40 hours. With the skill that the ceremony did not assess, because the ceremony assessed you before the ceremony assessed the wolf, and the assessing you was the filter, and the filter was wrong, and the wrong is mine. The cottage doorway held the reckoning. The wolf between them torn ear, grey wool. The 40 hours that the king was now holding with the particular respectful. I understand what this represents quality that the holding was carrying for the first time. Not charming, not insufficient. Necessary, made by hands whose skill the filter had prevented the king from seeing, because the filter saw the body before the hands and the bodies. Assessment contaminated the hand's assessment, and the contaminating was the prejudice, and the prejudice was the reckoning's content, and the content was being delivered at a cottage door by a king holding a wolf whose ear was torn by love. 3 days to Saltvik. The king at her door holding a wolf with a torn ear. I called it charming, and I meant insufficient, and the insufficient was wrong. The wolf is the most necessary object in my household. The ceremony assessed you before it assessed the wolf. The filter was wrong. The wrong is mine. Delivered at a cottage door, holding 40 hours of work he'd dismissed. The reckoning. Chapter 6. Hilma did not invite him in immediately. The not inviting was the 5 seconds extension the particular. I am deciding whether the reckoning is sufficient quality that the not inviting communicated. The reckoning was words. Words were the charming's medium. The charming had been words. The reckoning was words. And words that wounded required more than words to heal, because the healing needed the particular, demonstrated. The words are supported by behavior quality that demonstration provided, and that words alone did not. The wolf. Directed at the torn ear rather than at the man. The professional's assessment preceding the personal's. May I see the damage? Henrik extended the wolf. Hilma took it, the receiving carrying the particular, professional. My hands know this object quality that the receiving communicated. The hands that made the wolf were holding the wolf. The holding was the homecoming the object returned to the hands that produced it. The particular, circular. I made you and you our back quality that the returning circularity communicated. The ear's assessment was brief. The tear's evaluation, stress point failure. Predictable, the ear's junction with the head was the holding's primary contact point. And the primary contact point received the maximum stress, and the maximum stress produced the failure at the duration the stress's accumulation predicted. The failure was not a flaw. The failure was love's signature written in wool. The holding wore the ear because the holding was strong, and the strong was the loving, and the loving was the wolf's evidence of its own importance. I can repair this. The professional's assessment complete. The repair will match. Same wool, same stitch, same tension. The match will be invisible to standard evaluation but detectable to the child, because the child's evaluation operates through touch, and touch evaluates differently than vision. The repair will be detectable. The detectable is acceptable if the detectable is mine, if the child's fingers find the repair, and the finding finds the same hand's signature that the original carries. The signature matches. The match is the acceptance. The assessment was the expertise. The expertise was the 40 hours evidence. The expertise was the skill the filter had not assessed because the filter assessed the body, and the body's assessment consumed the filter's capacity, and the capacity's consumption prevented the filter from reaching the expertise that the body contained. Henrik heard the expertise. The hearing was the data, the particular, accumulating. This person knows what she is talking about, quality that the hearing produced when the hearing's content was expert, and the expertise's evidence was the assessment's precision. And the precision was the skill, and the skill was the thing the charming had dismissed. The dismissal's error was audible in the expertise. The audible was the reckoning's continuation, the error becoming more visible with each evidence of the skill the error had failed to see. Come in. The invitation extended after the professional assessment, after the reckoning's delivery, after the particular, I have decided quality that the extending communicated. The deciding was, the reckoning is heard. The hearing does not resolve the reckoning. The resolving requires time. The time begins with the entering, and the entering is permitted, and the permitting is the beginning. The cottage interior was the workshop, wool, needles, the organized, skilled professional's workspace quality that the interior carried. Henrik entered, sat where directed, a chair beside the workbench, positioned to observe the repair. The positioning was the invitation's condition, watch. The watching was the education. The education was the reckoning's next phase. Hilma repaired the wolf. The repairing took 40 minutes, the ear's reconstruction requiring the particular, matching. The original technique must be replicated, quality that matching repairs demanded. The wool from the same batch stored in the workshop's inventory, the sulfate gray that the village's sheep produced, and that the village's spinning produced, and that the village's economy produced. The needle the same gauge. The tension matched through the hand's particular, muscle memory. The hands remember the original quality that the hands provided, because the hands had made the original, and the making's memory was in the muscles, and the muscle's memory was the matching's mechanism. The repair was the skill made visible. 40 minutes of the king watching hands that the ceremony had not assessed performing work, that the ceremony had not valued with expertise, that the ceremony had not recognized. The watching was the education. The education's content was, this is what the charming dismissed. This is what 40 hours looks like when the looking is informed by the understanding that the looking requires. This is the skill. The skill was always here. The seeing was what was absent. The absent seeing was the filter's product. The filter produced the blindness. The blindness produced the charming produced the reckoning produced the watching produced the seeing. The seeing was 3 months late. The late was the error's duration. The duration's ending was now. In a cottage, at a workbench, watching hands repair a wolf whose ear was torn by a child's love. The repair completed, the ear restored, the stitching matching, the wool matching, the particular. The hand's signature is consistent quality that the matching produced. The wolf was whole. The wolf was the same wolf carrying the repair's addition to the history that the wolf's existence contained. Made, given, mocked, loved, torn, mended, every stage present. The repair visible to the touch that knew the wolf well enough to detect it. The repair invisible to every other evaluation. The child would feel the repair. The child would accept the repair. The acceptance would be the maker's hand's verification, the verification conducted through a 3-year-old's fingertips, and the fingertips' verdict being the only verdict that mattered. 40 minutes of repair. Same wool, same stitch, same tension. The hands remembered. The king watched the education he should have received at the ceremony. This was the skill the filter had dismissed. Made visible in a cottage workshop. The wolf was whole again, carrying a new stage in its history. Made, given, mocked, loved, torn, mended, every stage present. Epilogue 6 months later, Elias accepted the repair. The acceptance was the fingertips' verdict, the particular, tactile. The fingers found the change, and the change is acceptable quality that the verdict communicated through the medium of a 3-year-old's touch. The fingers found the repair. The fingers evaluated. The fingers concluded, same hands, same signature. The repair is mine because the maker is mine, and the maker's hands are the hands that made the wolf, and the hands that mended the wolf, and the hand's sameness is the acceptance's condition, and the condition is met. Sleep continued. 2 minutes, the wolf in the arms. The ear intact. The love continuing. Henrik returned to Saltvik. Not once regularly. The regularity was not the wolf's maintenance, the wolf, repaired, required no further intervention. The regularity was the particular, I am returning, because the returning is owed quality that the returning carried when the returning was the reckoning's continuation, and the continuation was the behavior that the words required to be supported by. The behavior was, Visiting. Seeing, the particular. I am learning the thing the filter prevented me from seeing quality that the visiting produced, when the visiting was the education, and the education was the skill, and the skill was the village, and the village was the person, and the person was Hilma. The visits contained Elias. Brought from the palace the particular. I want my son to see where the wolf came from quality that the bringing communicated. Elias in Saltvik was a 3-year-old in a wool village, and the 3-year-old in the wool village was the particular. Sensory. Everything is soft quality that Saltvik produced in a child whose primary comfort object was wool, and whose wool's origin was this village, and the village's wool everywhere quality was the comfort object's context expanded to environmental scale. Elias met Hilma. The meeting was the wolf's origin encountering the wolf's destination, the maker meeting the holder, the hands that made meeting the arms that held. The meeting was conducted through the wolf Elias showing Hilma the wolf the way Elias showed everyone the wolf. The particular, 3-year-old, look at my thing quality, and the showing directed at the maker producing the particular, circular. I am showing you the thing you made quality that the circularity communicated, and that the communicating was the connection. Hilma received the showing. The receiving produced the particular, makers. I see my work being loved quality that the receiving generated when the receiving was the evidence that the making had produced love, and the love was visible in the child's grip, and the grip was the evidence, and the evidence was the most valuable review the maker had ever received, because the review was conducted by the person the making was for, and the person's review was, I hold this every night. I cannot sleep without it. This is the most important thing. The relationship between Henrik and Hilma grew through wool. Not through governance, not through the institutional infrastructure that royal relationships typically employed through the particular, material. I am learning your craft quality that the wool provided as a medium. Henrik learned to knit. Poorly the particular, unskilled. The hands do not know this quality that beginning knitting produced in hands that had never knitted, and whose never knitting was being corrected through the specific, patient. I am teaching you instruction that Hilma provided, and that the instructions providing was the education's continuation, and the continuation was the reckoning's ongoing expression. The knitting was terrible. The king's hands trained for governance, for swords, for the particular large motor. Power expressing quality that royal hands were trained for produced stitching that was uneven, loose. Carrying the particular. Beginners. The hands are learning quality that beginner stitching carried. The stitching was not skilled. The stitching was the trying, and the trying the particular, visible. I am attempting the thing I dismissed quality that the trying communicated, was the apology that the words had been insufficient to deliver. Hilma watched the king knit badly, and the watching produced the particular, professionals. The assessment is ongoing quality that watching produced. The assessment was not of the knitting was terrible, and the terrible was expected, and the expected was not the assessment's subject. The assessment was of the trying. The trying was the data said, this person is willing to be bad at the thing he dismissed. The willingness to be bad is the humility. The humility is the reckoning's product. The reckoning's product is the thing the filter prevented. The king proposed in Saltvik. With a knitted wolf his own, made over 3 weeks of evening instruction, the stitching uneven, the ears dramatically asymmetrical, the left approximately twice the right size, the particular, beginners. I cannot control the sizing quality that the asymmetry communicated. The wolf was not skilled. The wolf was not beautiful by any standard that skill or beauty conventionally employed. The wolf was the try. The 40 hours of Hilma's wolf reflected in the 3 weeks of Henrik's wolf. The reflection was imperfect, the original was expertise, the reflection was attempt. The attempt was the message. The message was, I made this. With hands that did not know how. For a person whose hands do know how. The making is the respect. The respect is the apology. The apology is the wolf. Hilma held the terrible wolf. Assessed it with the professional's evaluation, the stitching loose, the wool incorrectly tensioned, the ears a disaster. The assessment produced the particular, honest. This is objectively bad conclusion that the assessment generated. The conclusion was accurate. The conclusion was also irrelevant. The relevance was not the quality. The relevance was the making. A king who mocked a gift had made a gift. The making was the reversal. The reversal was the reckoning's resolution. The resolution was the hands his, holding out a terrible wolf, hers, receiving it with the particular. This is the best gift quality that the receiving communicated, because the receiving's evaluation was not of the stitching, but of the stitching's meaning, and the meaning was, I was wrong. The wrong is knitted into every uneven stitch. The wrong is visible in every asymmetrical ear. The wrong is the wolf. The wolf is the apology. The apology is the proposal. The proposal is, let me keep trying. Let the trying be the relationship. Let the relationship be the learning. Let the learning be the lifetime. Yes, one word. From a cottage in Saltvik. Holding a terrible wolf. Accepting the try. Their daughter was born with her mother's hands the particular fine motor, the stitching will be skilled quality that the hand's genetics promised. Named Thyra, a name meaning strength. Chosen because the strength was the 40 hours, and the 3 days, and the walking back through the hall, and the dignity maintained, and the particular, enduring, I made something good, and the good endured quality that the strength represented. The grey wolf remained Elias's. Repaired once. Held nightly, the particular, permanent. This is my object quality that the permanent carried across years, the wolf aging as the boy aged. The wool softening further. The repair's signature becoming part of the wolf's texture rather than a detectable addition. The wolf's history accumulated, made in 40 hours by a woman in Saltvik. Mocked in 1 word by a king at a ceremony. Loved in 2 minutes by a boy at bedtime. Torn by the love's strength. Mended by the maker's hands. The history was the wolf. The wolf was the history. And the history said, the value of a thing is not determined by the person who receives it at a ceremony. The value of a thing is determined by the person who holds it in the dark. The person who holds it in the dark is a 3-year-old whose fingers know the stitching, and whose stitching is the safety, and whose safety is the wolf, and whose wolf was made by hands the ceremony did not see, and whose not seeing was the error, and whose error was corrected by a torn ear, and a 3-day ride, and a terrible wolf knitted by a king who learned that charming was the cruelest word he ever spoke, and that the cruelest word's correction was the trying, and the trying was the wool, and the wool was Saltvik, and Saltvik was Hilma, and Hilma was the hands, and the hands were the gift, and the gift was never insufficient. The gift was always the most important thing in the room just didn't know it yet.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this story. If you liked it, feel free to check out our other videos or YouTube channels where you can find more interesting stories. Your feedback in the comments means a lot to us.